Welcome to part 7 of the video series on how I constructed this arts and crafts style round table. This is the last video in the series and focuses on applying the finish. I'll show you my recipe for a simple and foolproof finish using off-the-shelf products that's easy to apply and gives you that great hand-rub satin look to the wood. The first step in preparing the wood for the finish is to blow or vacuum off all the dust. I like to use compressed air, gets in all the crevices, and then I use a tack rag. A tack rag is like cheesecloth impregnated with some sticky resin material that attracts the dust and removes it from the wood. The first step in the finish is to apply the stain. The stain that I'm using is an oil-based stain from Sherwin-Williams. It goes on pretty dark, but we're going to end up wiping most of this off. It looks great on the authentic table as well as the veneered table. I start with the table upside down so I can make sure that I get all those places that you might forget if it was right side up. I'm brushing the stain on using a foam brush. I find that these work best. They hold a lot of stain and they don't drip or run as much as a bristle brush. On a small piece like this, I can apply all the stain to the piece before I wipe any of it off. It should be less than 10 minutes to do that. So now that the stain's been applied to the entire piece, I go around with a soft cotton cloth and wipe off the excess stain that isn't soaked into the wood. This really makes the quarter sawn rays pop out of the wood because it's an oil-based stain that penetrates deeply into the wood. It's always easier to finish parts separately. So if you have a project that has pieces that are later screwed together, finish them separately and it'll make it a lot easier to get into those areas where the two pieces come together. And that's exactly what I did with the top. Using the same method, I apply the stain and then eventually wipe it off. Now I didn't apply any stain directly to the edges of the table. That's because a lot of this is end grain and it's going to soak up stain too much and darken more than the rest of the top. So what I do is apply the stain to the face of the top and then using the rag that I use to wipe off the excess stain, I wipe around the edges of the top. After the stain is thoroughly dried out, I go over it with super fine 4/0 steel wool. This is just to remove any dust that may have been captured in the stain and to generally smooth things out. Again, I blow off the piece with compressed air and go over it with a tack cloth. The next step in the process is to apply a tung oil finish. For this I use a bristle brush. The reason is the bristle brush gets into areas that the foam brush won't and floods the finish with the tung oil. You really want to put a lot on because you're going to let it sit just like stain and then wipe the excess off with a clean cloth as I'm doing here. Similar to an oil-based stain, tung oil penetrates the wood and helps pronounce the grain. I do the underside of the top first. I flood on the tung oil and then wipe it off about 10 or 15 minutes later using a soft cloth going with the grain in a buffing motion. Now I made these little standoff boards that have 4 nails in each corner so I can flip the top over and continue with the finishing process. Since the top may take more abuse than the other areas of the table, after the tung oil finish is dried, I'll go over it with 2 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. This leaves a nice satin finish that's both durable and it will protect the wood. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. The goal was to contrast how the authentic table was made versus the imposter, and which method might appeal to you. You may like the imposter table because quarter sawn white oak isn't available in your area or it's too expensive. You can try veneering. Or if you're not ready for the true through mortise and tenon joint, try loose tenon joinery. If you made one of these tables, either table, you'd be proud of its design and construction. I love arts and crafts style furniture, and I think the imposter table does a great job of mimicking its authentic counterpart. Quarter sawn white oak, the same joinery details without sacrificing any integrity. Well, that does it for this part of the video, but I invite you to check out the all-new Eagle Lake Woodworking to see the rest of the videos in this series and videos on other woodworking topics. You can access all parts of the videos in one easy viewer. Check out the photo galleries of in-process work, measured drawings, and finish projects. You can also download files associated with projects. So check it out at www.eaglelakewoodworking.com.